In for just a little bit, we're going to hear some amazing content. Hashtag content. Hashtag was actually a thing created by South by Southwest. True story. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for attending today's YEC Founders Lounge event, powered by the amazing folks at Prudential. We're going to ask you to follow along in today's conversation, and really a lot of incredible information that's going to be shared today. But before we get to that, I just want to give a quick story to understand why this is powerful, and then give the formal introduction to this afternoon's event. My first business back in early 2010s was an abysmal failure, and there was a reason for that. I had made every dumb rookie mistake one can make when starting a business, and took something that was making a substantial amount of money into the ground by making foolish decisions and doing things that no one should do, like taking people out to $1,000 dinners, or going and making egotistical-based decisions instead of rational ones. And in looking at that, years later, when I finally got my head straight, I learned one key thing that I didn't have, and that was a very smart and wise and trusted inner circle. A group of people that I could depend on in times good and bad. A personal group of people who would care about me, that I could also care about them. That didn't look at me like a sale or a transaction. That didn't care about my future business endeavors, but cared about me. And a lot of those decisions that I made could have been avoided had I just brought the right people into my world at the right time in my life. Well, thankfully, I learned that at a young age, and didn't have the misfortune of doing it later on in life, where I had the chance with my amazing partner, Mr. Ryan Paw, who's over here to my left, to build a great company, first in the form of YEC and then eventually the community company. But one thing I learned is that in picking the right people, entrepreneurs can change their business, change their lives, change their outcomes. And in order to understand who you have to pick, you have to look at the various challenges that are in front of you, which are many and never-ending. So how do you decide who are those key trusted players? Who are the ones that are going to help guide and steward you as you take on entrepreneurship, first from a team of one or two to a team of many? Well, we're fortunate today to have this event powered by one of those potential partners. I would encourage you to take a serious look at Prudential. Please, all the Prudential folks in the room, if they could just take a quick stand. I want to just give a big shout out. I see a bunch of folks over here. Where's Scott, Yemi, a bunch of the Prudential folks that have made today's event possible. Because really what they have provided is a forum that is going to really give some insights in some key areas. First and foremost, as entrepreneurs, what should we be looking at for the kinds of help we need? Who are those people? And in addition to the who, it's the how do we work with them? How do we look at the trends of the future? The futurists look at the world with a lens of an industry or a vertical that is changing on a daily basis. Industries being disrupted at a pace never before seen by man. To get the right folks, the right teams, the right service providers, the right mentors around us is to fundamentally understand one key thing, and that is that knowledge is true power. And so I want to just say a few things on that note, and then introduce our incredible panel who make me sort of look like the sideshow here by all means, by their amazing bios and resumes. So first I want to thank everybody for coming to YEC Founders House. Definitely check out all the amazing events and programming we're going to be doing over the next day. This evening is a wonderful party. If you haven't RSVP'd yet, you can see Miss Ashley Grant, who is here. Also that party is powered by our friends here at Prudential as well. So stay with us all day long. Lots of amazing things. Second, after the panel discussion, be sure to check out this really, really cool installation over here. We call it the 80-year-old millennial installation. You can literally take a look at what your life is going to look like with certain things, surveying your information. What is your life going to look like 80 years from now, or when you're 80 years old? What does your future actually look like once you actually put in some cool little data points? I'm not going to share the secret cool thing at the end. You have to see it for yourself. I'm not going to ruin it for you, but definitely check it out. It's a really cool installation, really cool project we're taking a look at. Next, I would definitely make sure that people are following us on live stream. This is an interactive conversation. You could follow us at a couple of different hashtags, hashtag YEC SXSW, South by Southwest, or hashtag 80YOM, 80-year-old millennial, hashtag 80 SOYOM. Send your questions. We'll be checking on those if you want to do it from the room or from those watching on your computers, desktops, and tablets. Just want to make sure that you guys are part of this conversation because in a minute you'll understand the wonderful panel we have behind us. And now with that, I'm going to step aside and introduce our wonderful panel. So stepping aside. First, we have our amazing moderator for today. I'm going to ask you guys to just do me a favor and stand up as I introduce you really quickly. Our moderator today is James Denham. He's a staff writer at Mike, covering personal finance, economics, and fintech. Before coming to Mike, James worked as a ghostwriter for startups and venture capitalists. And in addition to Mike, his writings have appeared in everything from Fusion, The Village Voice, The Street, Investopedia, and a lot of other cool stuff. And he's just an amazing guy that I had some wonderful drinks with. We shared a lot of amazing stories. Great guy, great moderator. Please welcome our amazing moderator, Mr. James Dennin. On the panel today, we have 4 amazing experts. First, Chris Penner from Prudential. He is the VP of Strategic Investments and Partnerships. Second, Miss Debbie Wissel. She is the VP of Advisory Services as Ellevest and employee number 3 at LearnVest. I don't know if you guys have heard of that company. It's done pretty well. Number 3 is Miss Carrie Parker. She's the president of consulting services at Kantar Futures. And Adam Jernigan, who's a YEC member. What? Sorry, a little plug there for all you YEC folks out there. And the founder and CEO of Financials OnTap. It's a digital marketplace for assessing vetted fractional CFO support. And with that, I'm now going to hand it off to our amazing moderator once again, Mr. James Denham. Check us out, yec.co, and we'll look forward to having and hosting all of you at our events throughout South by Southwest. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the panel.
All right, let's get right into it. I'm so excited to be here to talk about my 80s. Thank you so much to YEC and Prudential for hosting this amazing panel. I've got a few topics I want to make sure we get through, but then I want to make sure we have a lot of time for all of you guys to ask questions yourselves, because that's what this is all about, right? We're here to be interactive. So to start, one thing that I thought was very interesting in the Prudential 80-year-old millennial report was how contradictory this cohort can be sometimes, particularly when it comes to financial services. One great example from the numbers is about 2/3 of millennials think the entire investing process will be automated, and a slightly smaller percentage also think that they want to talk to real people anytime that they're making investment decisions, which is a little bit of a contradiction. So to start, I was hoping that Carrie could talk a little bit about what the 80-year-old millennial looks like. Like, is the cliche of the never retire, super neurotic, always going to work millennial who's always changing jobs, is that stereotype true? And does that sort of bear out in the report you did?
Yeah, so just to give a little context for the 80-year-old millennial work, which we all kind of laugh at because it is a rather ominous name, especially since millennials today are 21 to 39. And so the oldest millennial will be turning 40 this year, which in and of itself is a little bit surprising to people who think of millennials as that youth generation. But through this work, we were able to really think, well, in 40 or 50 years, what is life going to be like for millennials? And so we approach this by taking a pretty comprehensive view of all parts of life, not just financial services. So we pulled in futurists from Intel and Ford and worked with the Stanford Center for Longevity and really got a broad view of some of the change that's underway. And then we surveyed millennials and did some qualitative and quantitative to understand their thoughts. And as you'll see in the activation, there are really 4 themes that we focused on: the evolving workforce, augmented wellness, the future of finance were 3 of those. And to your point about the amount of change, the most surprising thing, the common theme, was that millennials, who are known as the disruptors, actually have some fear and anxiety about what's to come, because they envision a world where retirement may not exist. Think about that. Like, retirement as a thing may not exist because they don't feel that they will ever have enough money for retirement, or that 4-year college institutions in 40 years will be a thing of the past because they're irrelevant. Or, and this is amazing to me, that 83% of millennials actually think that they will have insurance plans for their personal data, kind of like life insurance today. So that's the risk that they see, but there's also opportunity in that as we think about what we can do today to start building toward that future.
How this is a question I'd like all of you guys to answer. How are incumbents doing at starting to address these challenges? I mean, especially Debbie, you've spent most of your career in startups, and uh, obviously, if you go and start a company, it's because you think the incumbents aren't doing it well as it could be done. How are incumbents doing at adapting to the new needs of this generation?
I'll take that one, I guess. I am generally very optimistic about how incumbents are handling this and how they've been influenced by startups, especially around customer-centric design. I think what we need to be careful of as startups and incumbents think about how to partner is that and especially for this crowd of entrepreneurs who want to start their own company, make sure that you're partnering with the right incumbent, because in my career in 4 startups, 2 of which have been acquired, incumbents can either accelerate your growth and be an amazing partner in terms of promotion, co-product development, marketing, you name it, or they can eat you up and kill you. And so I think it's important to know the signs before you really get very involved in the partnership as to which one that might be.
Chris, I'd like actually for you to jump in and respond to that. Has Prudential eaten up and swallowed any companies that you'd like to talk about?
Well, we certainly are active. What I'd like to say is we're definitely getting better at partnering with startups. It's something that we're in the risk business, right? Insurance is something that people get to manage their risk. So we tended historically to be risk averse. But we are getting better at working with startups. We do see a need. This is a new type of cohort of customer that's coming in. And so we've started to understand that there are new capabilities that we want to add to this. And in order to do that, you've always got kind of that build by partner equation. To be able to partner, we have to get better at identifying, working with, and making the process of engaging a startup a lot easier for those companies we work with. We don't want to kill them by a very lengthy and robust diligence process or the regulatory regime that we go through. So it's something that we're aware of, we're getting better at, but certainly I don't think anyone's fantastic at it yet in the financial services industry, but we like to think we're moving in the right direction.
Adam, moving to you. What are your thoughts about how incumbents are, like what to you as an entrepreneur makes for a good incumbent partner?
Part of that would be a lot of entrepreneurs, they get spread too thin looking for partnerships, right? It's very easy to see, hey, there's a lot of upside in this partnership, and entrepreneurs themselves are typically, at least myself, delusionally optimistic about a lot of things, right? This is going to be so great. Really, they need to be out there focused on managing their company or sales and less about out there creating partnerships and networking, right? It sort of goes to the entire co-working space, right? It's easy for people to say they're networking. You're just doling around all day. Nothing's coming out of these relationships for the most part. So to realize that that's going on and sort of take a step back and see, is this time worth spending?
Let's move on a little bit to the point that Carrie made about retirement, because I obviously like the idea that I won't have to work forever, and I'm a little concerned about that. There's some interesting data out that was actually from just this week from some academics at University of Missouri that suggests that less than 35% of millennials even have a retirement account at all. So is the implication, the suggestion that millennials don't think they're going to retire, we're not even buying the products, is the 401k working? Are the products that not only incumbents are doing, but even startups like Ellevest and Betterment, who are building robo-advisors, are those products working? And I think that's one that all of you guys could maybe touch on, going down the list.
Yeah, to answer your question, most millennials don't think that they will have enough money to retire. I think it's more than 8 in 10 don't think that they will. And so when you start thinking about, that's daunting. It's absolutely daunting to think about. And is it time to think about retirement in a different way in terms of phased retirement or other approaches? Because it's actually similar to how baby boomers thought about pensions in the 80s, that they had this massive fear that pensions wouldn't exist. And millennials are kind of in the same boat. So what are those things that you could do by partnering together in interesting ways to think about, maybe it's not looking at that goal of retirement that is so foreign and unachievable, but thinking about what are those small milestones that you really need to address today, because that feels more doable, and changing the conversation entirely instead of thinking about that, being an 80-year-old and retiring.
Yeah, if there's one thing that stood out to me in the 80-year-old millennial report, which I encourage you all to check out on the website, there's definitely a lot of uncertainty in this generation, and with good reason. There's a lot of change happening. We've identified what we think are a lot of these needs. Retirement is an area where we have a very strong business as well. I don't think the 401k is going away, but I think we need to do what we can to help this generation with that. So one example is student loans, for example, right? This generation's coming out with huge amounts of student loan debt. How can we help with that? And so getting into their shoes, trying to understand some of these needs is really that first step, and we're going to continue to work on other products. Financial wellness is another area, so people can understand, am I saving enough? Do I need to create an emergency savings fund? What are those steps to get financially healthy so that you can then begin to save for retirement? So we're doing what we can to work on that. It's an evolution and process, but certainly there are a lot of needs developing for this group.
So I'm going to cut to your question on, is the 401k working? So I, whether it's at LearnVest and Ellevest, I believe in investing, right? I believe that so many millennials, and especially women, need to turn their saving habit into an investing habit. That said, you can take an A-plus millennial who contributes $1,000 a month of their paycheck into their 401k. That's like such good behavior starting when you're in your 20s. And even if you were to do that every year until your 60s, you still might not have enough for a comfortable retirement. Given market volatility, given our longer lifespans, I think it's a huge opportunity for incumbents and for startups to think about better financial products for retirement, and a huge societal issue. The retirement of the pension, if you will, is relatively new, as is the 401k, and thinking about how we're asking people to save enough money out of their paycheck when they're already struggling to not be in consumer debt to last the remaining 40 years of their life. That is totally unrealistic, in my opinion, and I think we really need better financial products to help people through that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think for me, I would love to be in a position to never retire, right? To be fulfilled enough and enjoy what I'm doing that I don't need to retire and stay busy. Retirement sort of sounds extremely boring unless you have enough money to travel constantly. As far as saving for retirement, from an entrepreneur's perspective, and my wife's here in the crowd, she's going to hate this, but the advice I would give would almost be don't do it, right? It's a risk profile, and you're already taking a huge risk with the company or whatever it is you're starting. Why take cash flow out of that and put it in an account that you might get hit by a car tomorrow and never use? Right? So if putting that money in a retirement account is reducing your cash flow and therefore making your company in its current state more risky, it's probably not worth doing.
Do you think that and this is maybe I was trying to go in this direction, but the 401k is a company-provided vehicle. One of the things in the report, most millennials think that something like 3/4 of the workforce is going to be self-employed at some point. Like, how should incumbents and startups be partnering to deal with that? In your opinion, in particular, do you find that incumbents are offering the right services that a self-employed person who wants to work forever, who isn't trying to retire, that you're looking for?
Is it out there? I don't know. You have to be weary of financial engineering to some extent, right? Everything that's been created and exists is there for a reason. Do we need new products? Do we need new services? Or should people just be better at saving and spending less? Living like a miser is not a whole lot of fun, right? And so that would sort of be my viewpoint there.
Yeah. Chris, what about you? How does Prudential decide, whether to try and build these products in-house for these new self-employed, always working millennials, or when you're going to go look out into the market and find something to acquire or invest in?
Sure. Well, like anyone else, we're going to look at what we're good at, what we're less good at, what's core to our business, what's less core to our business, and there's a decision to be made there. One interesting thing about financial services is, traditionally it's not an area where you'd think of as, having R&D, for example, in the same way biotech might. We've got innovation labs, we've got offices working on developing new product, testing things out, and out of that there come a lot of ideas. And one of which, right now, an area we're looking particularly into is the 1099 workforce. It's an area we want to try to provide the same type of security as a W-2 employer would have, and that workforce continues to grow. So these are the kind of things that catch our attention. As far as whether to build, buy, partner, that's an equation that you have to measure every time you get involved. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, you really have to figure out, is it core to our business? How big do we think it's going to get? And can we provide a best-of-breed solution, or is there something else out there? Student loans, I mentioned, we're looking at a partnership there. In fact, we have one inked, and we're coming out with next month that we're going to be starting to release this. We've got several other areas in financial wellness and related there. So I think you're not going to see a one-size-fits-all with that, but hopefully we're going to find the thing that helps us get to market fastest with the most robust product that makes the most sense for our company and our customers.
Debbie, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about how you guys built Ellevest, because you created a new retirement product for a kind of new demographic, right? Like the working woman whose needs are a little different than, the needs of a 1960s, employee who is probably a guy who is, investing into his 401k. How did you make Ellevest, how did you differentiate it? What were some of the things you did to try and take into account some of these generational factors that we're talking about?
Yeah. So Ellevest is a financial service company designed for women, and our goal is to try and close the gender money gaps. We've started to do that by thinking about investing. Investing is an industry where women have not participated in the same amount that men have. They're good savers, but they end up sitting in cash rather than investing. And when we make less and we live longer, that ends up having a big impact on your retirement portfolio. So the great experiment we're running is, rather than just marketing to women, which many financial service companies have done, what happens when you bring a team together from the financial service industry and without, of women, of diverse women, and you talk to women and you build a product specifically for them from scratch? How is it different, and does it work? And a year in, what we see is that it's actually quite different. The financial service industry, especially around investing, you can't turn on the news or read about it without like sports analogies and war analogies and outperformance and financial products and who's going to manage your money, what their outperformance is going to be. We have found so far that we call our target customer L, and that fundamentally does not speak to L. Whether it's our research or what's actually playing out in our success so far, is that women think about their own money in terms of confidence. The freedom to leave a bad boss, to leave a sexual harasser, to stand up and walk out of a job that she doesn't believe fits into her values or she feels comfortable with. And so our platform talks about your financial goals. Why are you investing? What kind of life do you want to live? And the whole lens is through that. We don't ask someone to choose a specific index fund or stock like Fidelity or a TD Ameritrade does.
And so what kind of guidance are you giving them? Like how do you strike the right balance between expanding financial services to a new audience, but without doing it in a way that could seem condescending or pandering, like you're not smart enough to know what the differences between all these mutual funds are?
That's a good question. And one of the challenges we found is that when I say that I work for a company, an investment company for women and by women, the automatic reaction is, oh, how have you, is there like a pink tax? Do women not understand it? And what research study says, and we see it actually play out in the last couple weeks with the current market volatility, is that it's not that women don't get it, it's that they're risk aware rather than risk averse. So for example, in the past 2 weeks, the markets have been doing some somersaults. And some of our competitors, and even companies that we don't consider competitors, like Vanguard, big leaders of the industry, they've completely shut down. You can't log into their site because so many people are reacting to this market volatility. And we see the research playing out like every hour of our business where women they're calm, they're confident. All right, I said I'm gonna buy a house in 5 to 7 years. I've put my money in a portfolio accordingly, and I'm not gonna freak out. And so it's been an interesting time to see like, wow, the research has said this, it's been a hypothesis so far, and now it's playing out to be true.
To jump in there real quick, on the other side of that, right, is financial illiteracy is big business in our country, very big business, right? So there is a strong incentive out there to keep people from understanding these products, right? Because getting trapped in that cycle of debt is great for Donahue, right, or whoever is their spokesman these days. And so it's important to keep that in mind, is why people don't understand this more, why aren't we teaching this more in the schools? It makes up a giant part of our economy. It really, really does. Just debt in and of itself.
I'd love for Carrie to start on this one. Who do you think is doing kind of the better job at explaining these concepts to millennials? Is it incumbents or is it startups? And sort of as a follow-up, like, I of course like see a little bit of a risk in giving all my retirement money to a startup. 9 out of 10 businesses fail. Everyone knows that. But at the same time, millennials, we're special snowflakes. We want everything to be unique and catered to us. We don't want to do what our dads did. So how are millennials kind of approaching the trade-off there? Like, what is more important to us that you're seeing in the research? Is it the kind of tried and true? Are we a little more conservative than it seems? Or are we, fulfilling that stereotype in a sense where we all kind of know that we want like a unique, particularized product, and smaller niche startups are going to be better at delivering that?
That's a big question. I think that you started off the session actually talking about the digital first versus the human touch, and there's a lot in there, specifically in looking at how incumbents and startups can partner and how to actually deliver for millennials, because everyone thinks of millennials as digital first and they want digital everything, and so you invest in digital only servicing and investing, but we're actually hearing that they want a professional to reach out to them and actually have a human conversation. And I think that there are opportunities to rethink engagement and servicing and delivery cycles to figure out how can we automate everything up to the point where they actually do want and need that human touch. And by human touch, it's not make a better AI or make a better IVR. It's actually having a human being talk to them. And to your point about special snowflakes, I think it's because the millennials in particular, they do think that their situations are so unique that it requires a one-to-one dialogue. And we actually see that women and other populations who are farther behind on the investing curve are the ones who most want that human dialogue.
I'd just like to add to that. I think it's very interesting to see, you could talk about, do they want to talk to a human, not talk to a human? I think one of the things that really is occurring is that millennials are looking for more customized experiences, more of a personal touch. And that's why I think what Ellevest is doing is really interesting. I'm really anxious to see more of the platform because it was developed by women for this particular group, and there's going to be differences in there. And I think you're going to start to see this great diversity in, look, on the back end, there might be the same types of financial products, but people are learning about things in different ways at different rates. How can we cater more to the individual versus just trying to provide a one-size-fits-all product?
When you're thinking, I had a follow-up for you, Chris. When you're thinking about these kind of financial literacy challenges, where are you going to look? Like, as far as who's better at talking about this stuff to young people, are you going to go look for a Prudential legend, or are you going to go look elsewhere to a startup?
Well, I think all financial services companies, Prudential included, need to be aware that this new ecosystem is creating a lot of choice for people. So it's one thing to have great product, to have tried and true and tested product, but it's, again, also about catering to those specific needs of the individual, not just in terms of the product, but in terms of the experience. And so I can't predict exactly where those things are going, but I think it's very interesting when you see things like just this week, Amazon announcing that they're going to open up checking accounts. And I think that's a wake-up call for probably everyone in the financial services industry to say, it's not just about financial services anymore. That's the root of it. You want security in the products. When you get to the experience, it becomes a whole new landscape.
Yeah. Adam, I want to ask you, one thing that I've sort of found as someone who's worked pretty much exclusively at startups my whole career, when I work with incumbents, they're slow. Like, I will write them an email and it'll be my friend, and it'll take 8 hours for them to get back to me, and I can tell it's because I had to get 6 people to sign off on the email. Do you ever find that when you're working with incumbents or bigger businesses that they're not ready to work at the same pace and the same speed that entrepreneurs and that constant pivot that demands that they need to work at?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to understand what their incentives are, right? When you're working for a startup, you have all the skin in the game and the upside that comes with it. A lot of these people are just employees, right? And they have 100 other things to do, and they have somebody to report to, and politics to play, and whatever else might go on. They run into the same problem all the time. It's, let's set up a meeting. All right, let's do it tomorrow, right? There's no end to the day, whereas somebody has to go and be there until 5 o'clock and then sit in traffic. And it's hard to kind of go back and forth because the speed is that much faster with startups versus the incumbent. It's a difficulty.
Debbie, what do you think? I mean, as Ellevest was acquired by Washington Mutual. Like, what was Northwest, sorry. What was that experience like? And are there some ways that maybe the entrepreneurial mindset and the kind of incumbent business that's been around forever mindset are disaligned, and how can that get better?
So the cultures are really different at large incumbents versus startups. I think in order for a partnership to be really successful, there's kind of 3 things that someone needs to take into account. One is, I think it's really important, whether it's an acquisition or a partnership or even a large incumbent as a customer, that there is a senior level internal evangelist for you. Someone who can work across the silos to get things done. As well as someone more at the product manager or project manager level when it comes to implementation and making sure there's adoption to see that through on a day-to-day basis. So an internal evangelist and a good implementation team. And then I think the third part, and that Alexa at Ellevest did really well, is that when you're working with a big incumbent, you are always marketing and branding. It's almost like you're training the trainer to talk about your company, its mission, the brand. You always have to be on and doing that because you're right, they do have so many other things to do in their day-to-day. And unless incentives are really strongly aligned to promote the partnership, it's going to take a lot of work to kind of inspire the action above and beyond what already fits in a full workday.
Chris, obviously, and similar question, but like in the inverse, obviously, we're at South by Southwest. Every big brand you can think of is here. Every big incumbent company wants to seem like a cool, innovative startup. How should big companies actually go about approaching that, right? Because there's a difference between doing cool stuff at South by Southwest and actually fostering a real culture of innovation at your company.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I like to think that we've made great strides in that area. We've hired, I'm an entrepreneur myself, a couple of years into Prudential, and just in the short time I've been there, I've seen a lot of new innovative things happening. The mindset there has really begun to shift to one of, innovation, creativity, and there is a big effort to go on to make it better to work with startups because I think your 3 points are excellent. Look, working with a big company, it's going to take a little bit longer. To add to Debbie's points, you've got budget cycles, and then you've also got to figure out, look, we see a lot of these technologies. We do have a broad spectrum of needs. We do have a broad spectrum of ways that we want to help our customers, but we also have to look at where the budget cycle is. Is this aspirin or is it chemotherapy, for our situation? How big is the need? But I would just say, stay encouraged, and if you find a real match, and if you really can create a win-win type scenario, and you got to be honest about that, because again, we do talk to a lot of companies, some that we're interested in, and it might not be a hard yes, right? It might be a soft yes, which may mean come back to me next year, or but really, try to, if you can find that win-win, if you really fit within their business model, what they're trying to do, add true value to their customers, I think you're going to find a lot more receptive. And as big companies, I couldn't tell you exactly where we fall on the spectrum, but I do like to think that among the financial services companies, we have become a lot more innovative recently, and we do have the intention to work with these startups because we see them as the gateway to all these new capabilities for us.
I would actually build on that and say one other thing to pay attention to is make sure that there's some alignment of purpose and vision, because that is so important to millennials. Authenticity is one of their core values, and they still live that. They live that with the companies that they do business with. They live that through where they put their money in terms of the investments, and that's something that came through in this work as well, that making sure that there's some purposeful investing and purposeful choices of who they do business with. So having that alignment is really important to them as well.
Though another thing to keep in mind, to your point, is that this could take all of your time, right? It's hard as an entrepreneur to say no to a Fortune 100 company who wants to wine and dine you and understand your business. But that can be a very long game. And so understanding whether the incentives are aligned, and is this kind of a social conversation dinner that I can fit into some spare time, or is it truly business aligned and an opportunity for growth?
Yeah, and to that point, lived in Austin for 3 years now, and this is my first time coming down to South by Southwest. Really just because there is so many conversations and so much going on, it's hard to derive what exactly is coming out of that. It's easy to say there's some serendipitous moment, you're gonna bump into somebody and it's unlikely, right? And so understanding sort of the risks or the trade-offs is always important as an entrepreneur, having that in the back of your mind.
When back in my startup days, 3 whole years ago, we were at a startup.
Like a true millennial.
Exactly. We were a startup stock brokerage, and we had, I don't want to call it antagonistic, but we were out to disrupt the big incumbents. We wanted to take their business. We wanted to do what they did better than them. One thing that I've sort of started to sense, and I'm wondering, I'd like all of you guys to sort of chime in on this, is that relationship is starting to change a little bit. You're seeing way fewer companies pursue the conventional IPO exit, for example. Is it fair to characterize the relationship between these kind of startups, disruptors, and how they view the incumbents? Has it shifted? I mean, is that fair, or is it something else going on?
Start on that.
In terms of how the relationship has shifted, or the dynamic?
The dynamic between startups and incumbents. Are startups still trying to put the incumbents out of business, or are their objectives more nuanced and different now?
I think it's more nuanced. I mean, clearly I'm interested in both the startup and incumbent point of view, but there's a happy medium between the two. And if you especially look at the trust factor, right? There's a trust gap across the board. People don't trust big institutions. They don't trust financial institutions, but they do trust tech, so with the opening of Amazon. But there's also some skepticism of fintechs and actually having the longevity and the protection of data and privacy. So there's a natural meeting point, especially when you're looking at that trust gap, where incumbents can take what they have in terms of the size and the power and partner with startups for a long-term kind of venture that actually works in the best interest of consumers.
Just a quick follow-up on that trust question. Where's that lack of trust coming from? And can you put it in a little perspective? I mean, my dad doesn't love his bank either. Like, I wouldn't say the fact that both of us are a little skeptical of the Wall Street Fat Cats is like a huge generational difference. So where is that distrust coming from, and is the kind of line about millennials can't outlive the recession, we're still thinking about the recession, we're still blaming Wall Street for the recession, is that accurate?
Yeah, well, confidence and trust has been on the decline for decades at this point. And you think about millennials' formative years shaping their values, they lived through 2 big boom and bust cycles. They lived through the dot-com boom, then they lived through the Great Recession with the whole too big to fail. So a lot of that was reinforced to them as they were coming of age. And so there is that trust gap. And we actually saw some research, it was about a year or 2 ago, where millennials said that they'd be more willing to take on a financial services product from an Amazon or a Google or a tech company than they would one of the traditional companies because of that factor.
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point. The boom and bust cycle is that, look, I hope that every startup out there is going to say, hey, we're going to disrupt this market and the incumbents. But I think what you see, especially in fintech, is once they start to get some traction, reality starts to set in. There are a lot of regulatory hurdles, and having a larger partner can really help you through that. That's one of the ways that we try to help some of the startups that we've worked with during our time.
Debbie, what do you think?
You know, I think the financial service industry is pretty unique in this regard because if you think about it, financial services were like the original tech companies with the new technology. And that technology is now legacy and old and really hard to integrate with. But at the same time in financial services, you know what? It's really hard to get a bank charter and it's really hard to become an insurance company. And that's where a partnership can be really strategic and beneficial. But I would say that, you know, when we think about partnering with an incumbent, there are so many different forms that can take, from an incumbent as a customer, an incumbent as like co-promotion of a product to serve your customer better, co-marketing, and all of those have different timelines, but nothing happens all of that quickly, especially in financial services. Like, I'd say 4 to 6 months would be the fastest thing anything could ever happen in a way, even for co-promotion, because it's such a heavily regulated industry. And so when thinking about the value of a co-founder's time, thinking about that and how much value is it really going to unlock and when? Because with financial services, what I found is that there's a 12 to 18 month runway for any really meaningful contract. And when you think about fundraising, 12 to 18 months can make or break a company.
Yeah, absolutely. And during that 12 to 18 months, you keep in mind that there's churn within these companies, right, that people don't, it adds significant risk people aren't thinking anything of. You lose your champion internally and you're toast. As far as from a investing standpoint, it is difficult for startups to understand the risk profile in such a way that they understand the fees are going to chip away at them if they do put money within something. Is this risk investment, is it risky, or is this a solid investment but it's going to yield nothing at the end of the day, versus lifestyle risks, so that all of these things sort of blend together and you're sitting there trying to trust a financial advisor as you're putting money away that's being chipped away from your company.
Carrie, risk aversion is a really great topic among us millennials. Line about us, at the risk of having all my questions come from, is this millennial cliche true? The millennial cliche about our risk aversion is that we're, completely paranoid and super risk averse, and it's creating headwinds as far as getting started with investing. How are millennials approaching risk, and are we doing so in a way that's setting us up for not ideal 80-year-old life?
Millennials have shifted quite a bit in terms of their level of pragmatism as they started to hit these more adult life stages, because millennials used to be a little bit more risk tolerant, living the life that they want. I'll work for a company that I care about even if I don't get the right money or salary. We're actually seeing that pragmatism come to the forefront as they've gotten a little bit older, but they're still passionate, and I mentioned their values, that they want to see their values come through in how they're investing. I think as that fear comes to the forefront, thinking about, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to retire, they're going to try to find that balancing point of, I've got to be a little bit riskier to get a payoff. But to your point, there's still some fear there.
Yeah. Debbie, what do you think? What is the best way to help millennials overcome that risk aversion? Because on one hand, you can't be like, hey, buy our products, they're perfect, it'll be great. You need to have an enlightened conversation with them about it. But at the same time, there is evidence that people really are more risk averse than they need to be. What's the right way for startups and incumbents to work together to overcome that?
Good question. If I had the answer, I tend to not want to group millennials all in one group, just like I don't like to group women in all in one group. There's certain, trends that are true to groups, but I think that for financial services, Ellevest is a fiduciary. And so when we think about getting someone over the hump to invest, in large part, we have to make sure that they've been responsible in paying off their credit card debt and establishing emergency savings fund. There's a lot of things they need to do before they truly are ready to invest, and that we can encourage them without concern. But certainly Ellevest spends a lot of time building trust with the brand. Like while we are a financial service company, we're also at the epicenter of this movement in trying to close the gender investment gap. And I do think that builds a lot of trust that other financial service firms haven't approached in that way before.
Adam, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the risk aversion aspect of being an entrepreneur, because obviously it is an enormous risk, professional and otherwise. You got to leave your job. You might not make money for a little while to become an entrepreneur. What's the sort of state of the resources available to entrepreneurs? Are there ways that process and journey can be a little easier so that more millennials will go start businesses?
Yes, the first part of that question, it's extremely risky, so you have to be in it for the right reasons, right? It's not a lottery ticket, and you're in it for those reasons. Me, I hate sitting in traffic, right? So I can't go work for somebody else because I can't commute, right? I'm in it for those reasons outside of financial incentives. It really does make a difference. But as far as the resources out there in the market, it's extremely predatory. It really is for startups, and I feel it's why so many startups don't make it, because they paid $1,500 for a domain name, and then somebody $5,000 to build them a WordPress template that this guy spent 5 minutes on, right? And they run out of cash before they're in any sort of position to actually get acceleration or some sort of inflection. And at the same time, you have to be wary of that, and you start talking about partnering with larger incumbents. And some of these guys, what is their incentive? Because it's just as easy to create regulation that keeps you out of getting in, or as they say, anything can be built in a matter of days if you have enough resources. So it's not about having a better product, it's about gaining market share. So it's extremely difficult in that sense that it's a brand. It's how quickly can we build the market share, and in order to do that, it's a process, it's a methodology in getting people through that pipeline.
Yeah, Chris, just as a follow-up, as the source of that urgently needed cash, how should VC strike the right balance between investing in companies that are going to be fiscally disciplined, because that's obviously important, but at the same time giving them the resources they need? The right domain name, spending $15,000 on a domain name sounds insane, but the right domain name can be really, really important too.
Yeah, there's so many ingredients that go into it. First and foremost, the team, obviously, but in terms of how they spend their money and where to spend the money, I think it's going to differ depending on the product, the type of product. I had a conversation earlier with Debbie, and we were talking about, how to get the message out about Ellevest. Is it best to do some advertising, or is it word of mouth? Is it great to have a great marketing message or a great product? This is a balance that I think you're always going to have. I think the main thing is just to look at how the team has come together, what are the requirements for that particular product in that particular marketplace, and do they have a track record of being financially disciplined? Obviously, that's hard when it's someone's first company, but a lot of times we see serial entrepreneurs now. We have people that are 27 years old starting their second or third companies these days. But so you do get a little idea of that. Checking a little bit on their background and other things, but it really it comes down to the company, what the needs are. There's some people out there. If you listen to the Elon Musks of the world, they'll say, "Oh, you don't need to spend any money on marketing, right? Just go out and build a great product." So everyone can have their opinion there. I'm more of let's look at what this company is, what they're trying to do, and what the responsible needs are. I also don't like to get too operationally involved in the companies. If you've made the right investment, you've invested in the right team, and you got to give them a little leeway to do what they need to do to succeed. But obviously, too many $1,000 dinners and things like that does eat up a lot of capital, so you got to strike that balance.
Yeah, do you get a sense that startups are getting a little more cost conscious? Sort of going back to the point I made earlier, you're seeing fewer big exits. Do you get a sense that startups are being a little more careful with their cash than they were 3, 4, 5 years ago?
I think so. I think we've seen a couple of these cycles, as we mentioned before. People have seen certainly compared to anyone who actually got through the dot-com bubble, there were just outstanding amounts of cash thrown around and wasted on things. But I think these days, look, the cost of actually starting a company has come way down. One of the things you'll notice too is in the early rounds, you can get a lot farther with a lot less capital now, and I think just that helps the companies be more fiscally responsible, at least in the early days, right? When you're getting involved, you don't need tons of money because you got Amazon Web Services now. You can get people to work for relatively low rates if they're really believers in the technology, which is what you want to see anyway. So a lot of things have kind of trended towards very efficient, but ultimately, if they do want to scale, they're going to need some capital.
Debbie, what do you think?
Well, to the product versus marketing question, I think one thing that is really important to take into account with partnerships is the if you build it, they will come mentality. I think idealistic entrepreneurs feel like I'm going to build it and it's going to be awesome. Everyone's going to come. And what I found out is that that's not the case. No matter how great your product is, you're going to need some type of marketing or distribution channel. That's even the case when you're partnering with the best incumbent that your company can choose, whether it's for co-promotion, distribution, or co-product. You're going to need to work really hard to make sure people come to it, especially in financial services. It's boring. No one really wants to think about it. There's a lot better things to do than think about it. So you really need to get the right angle in marketing.
It's boring, and from a company standpoint, it's much more fun to spend money on marketing, right? And think of the upside there. Selling financial services into companies from a standpoint of helping them be responsible with their cash and that sort of thing, it is polarly opposite of what everyone else is out there selling. They're selling, look at what I can do for you, look at what I've got you. Financial services, you're selling, look at what I'm going to save you from, which isn't all that compelling. And in hindsight, it might be far more valuable, but people don't want that, right there up front.
Right, I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume there might be some entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs out here in the audience. So I'd love to open it up to some Q&A. If anybody has any questions for our distinguished panel.
I do. You guys were talking about getting cash and things like that. And apart from reaching out to the CEO, emailing them directly or cold calling them, are there other strategies that you would recommend in reaching out to incumbents?
Yeah, the question, just because it wasn't on the mic, was what are the best strategies for reaching out to incumbents and other sources of capital, right? Yeah, I think that's something that most of you guys can speak to, so if you want to.
I can tell you what we do and what kind of works for us at this point. We do get some inflows. Networking is always important, and that's whether it's incumbents or wherever you're going to go. Having some kind of connection into a business helps. I get people referred to me all the time. And it's just great to take a look. It's hard with incumbents because we have a lot of things going on that you might, you don't see into the kind of developmental side of what we have. Going to events is a great way to meet. I'm here at South by Southwest. We go to a lot of others. Money 2020 is another one. Finovate, things like that. So
Corner Chris after this. I think that's an advertisement. Corner Chris.
sure. But maybe Debbie has a story. I mean, getting in with incumbents.
Yeah, I would go back to those three principles of it's really important to have a senior level internal evangelist, and then it's really important to have someone who's strong and a go-getter on your implementation team. How you get to those two different people is probably really different, and both help with networking. Networking helps with both, but there are different events that you're going to find them at and different ways you're going to win them over. With Sally Krawcheck as our CEO, she's celebrity in a way, so it's easier to get the C-level appointment around it. But I've certainly seen it done at other startups where it's just nose to the grindstone and you get it done.
One other thing, just to add really quickly, and this goes back to the marketing thing too. We read a lot of the trade stuff, so getting some PR out there, getting on even blog sites and things like that. If we can find you as well and we have a need, that always helps. And it's always a little bit better than just regular marketing. Marketing's great, but getting someone to write about you and say something nice is a great way to get noticed.
The old adage always works: ask for advice, get money; ask for money, get advice. So approaching people in that sense of genuinely asking for their feedback is always worked.
Got it. Any other questions?
I have a question. So, we're example would be millennials embracing like dumb phones. I guess first of all, is that real? And then how does that impact service delivery?
I think that'd be a good one for you to start with.
Yeah, so we see millennials reflect this sort of all in, all out mentality in a lot of parts of their lives. So tech is one of them. Media consumption is another. I mean, my God, binge watching was the word of the year a couple years ago, and then they go tech free. So, I think it's just understanding when those all in points are to engage and understand that they're navigating pretty much all parts of their life very agilely, with a lot of agility.
What about, I'd like for you guys to elaborate on that a little more. I mean, does the techlash, the sort of perception you're talking about, I mean, there's a lot of journalists doing little thought experiments where they're going to go leave the internet and be in the woods for a week. I mean, does that bode well for the culture of innovation? I mean, is that, if people are, afraid of their phones, is that a good thing for, the future as far as people being excited about making new stuff?
It goes back to timing is everything, right? And they're all in, they're all out. To me, it's timing, it's serendipity, it's luck, all of those things together. So it's random. You don't know, right? That gives me confidence to go out there and actually do something because there is no calculation or methodical way of going about it. It's just resourcefulness and actually getting out there and making it happen. So I've found the less you know about something sometimes, or say it the other way, the more you know about something, the less likely you are to jump in and find it because you think it's efficient. If you don't know enough about it, you can jump in, you see problems, and you come at it from sort of a different angle, and that's, I think, these rapid rises that we see.
I mean, whenever you have a lot of something, you always get kind of this knee-jerk reaction against it at some point. So maybe that's what we're experiencing with techlash. I guess being in financial services, what I would say is at the end of the day, I don't think these people are going to be taking their money out and putting it under a mattress, right? They're still going to need to be invested. And I actually think this would be an argument. I think when you look at the techlash, you got a dumb phone, but people still want to manage this stuff. Maybe they're really just making a call for simplicity. There's so much choice out there. There's so much going on. So finding a great platform, finding a place to put your money that you really trust, getting yourself on kind of an automated path, that gives you the ability to now go to a dumb phone and not have to check your account every day. You know it's in good hands, and you can maybe have your techlash.
Yeah. I think technology has certainly increased the expectation of service. And so it's hard to, in financial services or really in anything, people expect a real-time response if they're having an issue with your product or service. But I personally am optimistic about this idea of a techlash. I don't think that your brain can always be on, and the idea that people are disconnecting and spending some time in the woods, like, thank God. So, without social media.
Amazing. All right, we've got time for one more question for our panel, if anybody else.
Just one quick question. This might be geared more toward Carrie, but aside from the technology piece, are there some other cultural or value shifts that you're seeing based on the data?
So yeah, that question was any other important cultural value shifts going on among millennials that are represented in the data?
Yeah, we don't see their values changing per se, but we see them manifesting in different ways as they get older. So as most millennials now, they're 21 to 39, they are starting to hit those parenting life stages and more foundational life stages. And so we're seeing that need for authenticity and risk just pivot a little bit with how they're putting their focus and their energy.
All right, on that note, I think we will wrap things up. I want to thank our amazing hosts, YEC and Prudential, again for putting this panel together, and thank all of you guys for spending your South by Southwest with us. I know there's a lot you could be doing right now, so it's awesome that you're here.